welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. Briahna, let's get right into it, shall we?
Yeah, we shall. Police have shared new details about the identity of the suspect in the Covenant school shooting in Nashville. 28-year-old Audrey Hale was under the care of a doctor for a, quote, emotional disorder and legally purchased at least 7 firearms from 5 different gun stores. 3 were used in Monday's shooting. Now, law enforcement had not been previously made aware of Hale's treatment. However, Nashville police said yesterday their parents felt that they should not own weapons.
Fox News' Tucker Carlson covered the shooting last night. He's facing flack online after saying that transgenderism is the enemy of Christianity. Let's watch.
Why are some trans people so angry, and why do they seem to be mad specifically at traditional Christians? We can't think of any trans person who's ever been murdered by a pastor. As far as we know, that has never happened. So it's not an actual threat of violence from Christians that's inspiring some trans people to buy AR-15s. No, it's got to be more fundamental than that. And it is. The trans movement is the mirror image of Christianity and therefore its natural enemy. In Christianity, the price of admission is admitting that you're not God. Christians openly concede that they have no real power over anything, and for that matter, very little personal virtue. They will tell you to your face that they are sinful and helpless and basically absurd. They're not embarrassed about any of this. They brag about it. That saved a wretch like me, goes the most famous Christian hymn ever written in English. The trans movement takes the opposite view. Trans ideology claims dominion over nature itself. We can change the identity we were born with, they will tell you with wild-eyed certainty. Christians can never agree with this statement because these are powers they believe God alone possesses.
I mean, this was an interesting take. I certainly would never want to indict all religious people or all Catholic people for something that one cohort of folks did. But if we're going to go down that route, if you say someone does something and this is endemic to their ideology, why would you want to open that door when it's estimated that 216,000 children were molested by Catholic priests between 1950 and 2020? And whereas there are at best 3 trans people in the history of trans people that we're really talking about here in terms of mass shootings who have ever perpetrated something like this.
Sure. I'm seeing a lot of, I think, conservatives succumbing to the exact thing they criticize when it's a white male shooter or a right-wing shooter, where they say, don't make this about a group. No one is responsible for this, but the person who did it.
Yeah.
That's often a conservative and also a libertarian response because we believe in individual rights and individual accountability. That's often a response to what the mainstream media is saying in cases of shooting. Yeah, I think that should be how we treat these scenarios, whether the shooter is a white male Christian or a Trump supporter or black or an Islamist or a transgender person. The responsibility is that person's actions. No one has ever wronged you to a degree where you are justified in killing random people, children.
Certainly.
So we should. It is a good impulse to blame no one but the person who actually pulls the trigger. It's a good impulse in all those other instances, and it would be a good impulse here. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot from various kind of people who are critical of aspects of transgender activism or the transgender movement, which I think you can criticize some tactics or what is often I've come into conflict with people who are, even though I support transgender people's rights, about what you're expected to say or what the rules should be for how you're supposed to address people. I want to address people however they want me to address them, but what you're going to obligate other people to do. So I'm seeing people who have those criticisms, but then it's like, aha, now there's a trans killer in this case, so we can graft that onto some penchants for violence.
Use it as an excuse to disrespect them.
Which is just not right. I was interested by the whole, the comment. The parents clearly did not want this person to have access to guns, so that suggests that they knew the individual was disturbed, had a mental health track record, was able to purchase guns anyway. The only thing I really want to say about that is there is a a law, a provision that I don't know that they have it here, they probably don't, but that some states have, that some on the right have been supportive of, the red flag law, where you can get basically a restraining order against someone to prevent them from being able to have firearms based on mental illness.
Tennessee has no red flag laws.
Yeah,
and apparently the mother was an advocate for gun control in some social media posts that people turned up. And if it was the case that she was aware of, her child's mental illness and was aware that their child was pursuing gun ownership and was trying to warn, and there was no mechanism to warn, that just really compounds this tragedy. One other thing about the Tucker segment I would notice that I saw some folks pointing out that when Dylan Roof shot up at the Charleston church, that wasn't framed as an attack on Christianity. Of course, that was a black church that he targeted and was frankly welcomed into the session, welcomed into that day's sermon, and invited very warmly by church members before he chose to murder so many people there. And it is interesting to see to examine why an attack on Christians in that instance wouldn't be framed as a white male attack on Christianity, whereas this is being framed as a trans attack on Christianity, and what the dynamics are at play there. But meanwhile, in an Instagram video, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hit out at critics like Tucker Carlson, accusing them of projecting their ill intentions onto trans people. Let's watch that.
The first time I was ever hit on by a grown man, I was about 13 or 14 years old. I still had braces in my teeth. And if you ask a lot of women about the first time that they had encountered something like that, they will often say 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. When I was in my early 20s and I worked as a waitress on an outdoor cafe, there was a man that would park on the side of the street, and we realized that he was pleasuring himself to the waitresses that were going back and forth on the sidewalk. I can't tell you how many stories I and almost every woman I know have about things like this. And when you actually look at who's committing this abuse, it's majority straight men. Many of these disgusting and insinuating attacks on trans and LGBT people are actually projections of what predatory, cisgender, and often straight men do when left alone in the presence of women, or sometimes horribly children. So instead of getting you to challenge the patriarchy, they're trying to get you to challenge the very gender expressiveness that challenges patriarchy. Don't get it twisted, because a lot of people attacking drag are projecting.
Look, I understand what she's trying to do there, and I certainly
I don't think she quite nailed that one.
I'm empathetic with the experience that she's describing, and the experience that she's right that a lot of women have gone through. And statistically, what she's saying about who is normally doing it is correct. I mean, that's just
right, because that's statistically that is most of the overwhelming majority of the population.
And as we've been saying, over the last couple of days now, the jump from this is like a statistical trend to we should characterize the nature of what's going on here as linked to a person's identity is a dangerous leap. And I understand the desire to push back, given the narrative that's coming out of Tucker Carlson and some of these more right-leaning media figures and political figures right now. But I don't think that doing what they are doing, two wrongs making a right, is the way to resolve this. I think that you should say, despite the statistical reality that it would entitle me to make similar claims about the inherent toxicity of white men, I'm choosing not to do so because it's not really about that.
We're talking about a mass shooting that was, children being gunned down, and then she's talking about, but women, even young women, have experience of being made to feel uncomfortable in a sexual context. Like, those are not really comparable things at all. Statistics on those things also are always very kind of all over the place. I used to do more reporting on campus due process procedures and sexual misconduct and all those kinds of things. It was before Me Too, but you remember hearing over and over again, we hear, 1 in 4 women on college campuses has been raped. And I did some reporting on this statistic, and it was like very hard to track that down. And it seemed like a very probably if you include all uncomfortable interactions that all people on campus have ever had, you could get to that number. But the kind of like really graphic sexual assault, it was harder to trace down that thing.
I think that's probably true. I gotta say, as a woman in the world with girlfriends and talking to people, at a certain point, and this is outside of a college campus context, I am confident that sexual assault is much more common than most people believe it is. That being said, I do think that this example that she brought up wasn't necessarily as germane to what's going on right now as I would have liked. And she does sometimes have a tendency, and I know this is hard and politicos struggle with this, to personalize things and give the appearance that she's making things about her that aren't really about her. And I don't think that's her intention. And I think the underlying issue she's talking about is legitimate and fair game. But I don't know that this is the time.
Well, there's also like an elite discourse around it where people are obsessed with it on campuses, even though actually the good statistics we had is that women in college were far less likely to suffer this than people in working class. It's family, it's all those things. Yeah, not saying sexual misconduct
foster
is
care
not
system,
right, exactly.
Low-income people not being able to have access to the criminal justice system and not having their crimes, their perpetrators to track down. All of that is completely true. Yeah.
So anyway, I do think we should always push back on people trying to blame an entire group for the actions of one person. Let's blame that person.
Yeah, that used to be a liberal progressive principle.
Yes, yeah, but both sides, we're in such a rotten time in the discourse. I mean, this has been going on for a while, but people just want to demonize the entire other side when they can slot someone on, ostensibly connected to that side, having done something really horrible.
Yeah.
And it's a bad impulse. Makes us worse off. Before we go to Briahna's radar, we do want to issue a correction for something we said in a segment yesterday. When covering an update on the investigation into the Biden family's overseas financial connections, we cited Republican Senator Ron Johnson telling Fox News that a Chinese-owned bank, a bank owned by China that was headquartered in L.A., had handed over a cache of financial records that strengthens the House Oversight Committee's investigation. We identified the bank falsely as Chinese-owned. It's an American bank, actually, and we want to read a statement from the spokesperson of that bank. We're going to put it up there. Cathay Bank is an American bank founded, headquartered, and publicly traded in the United States, which proudly serves our local communities across the United States. Founded more than 60 years ago in Los Angeles, where it is still based, Cathay is not in any way owned or controlled by the Chinese government, and any suggestion to the contrary is false. Okay, we got that out of the way, and we'll have Briahna's radar coming up next, and of course more developments on the horrible shooting as they come. Stay with us.